Good evening and a warm welcome to all of you to the 35th Annual Eudora Welty Writers Symposium. And for those of you who were here earlier for the unveiling of our historic marker, honoring the 6 brave women who integrated this institution, I'd like to recognize one of the 6 who dared, Laverne Green Leach, who is with us here tonight. It was a wonderful event, and it commemorated this, the 6 who dared, and also the beautiful relationship between Mississippi School for Mathematics and Science and the W. And we are very grateful for that and for the work that Dr. Erin Kemker and her W students did years ago, and then what Chuck Yarborough and MSMS students did from there to get us that marker. So it was a beautiful day. So I'll just take a point of privilege. You know, some institutions are able to celebrate homecoming with football and marching bands in October, but we are even better than that. We get to celebrate with writers and readers, and it's just so cool. So this symposium offers a platform for established writers to share their wisdom, their works, and experiences, and it's a nurturing ground for aspiring writers, and it is a nirvana for readers like me. So in this fast-paced digital world where information is readily available at our fingertips, we gather here to celebrate the transformative magic of story. The written word has the ability to transport us to distant lands and different eras, and the power to evoke profound emotions and to challenge our perspectives. Our keynote speaker tonight, Katy Simpson Smith, managed to do all of this in her work, The Weeds. Please enjoy this evening and return to hear our other writers throughout the day tomorrow and Saturday morning. And welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, President Miller. Next is, I would like to welcome to the stage Steve Yates from the University Press of Mississippi to present the Eudora Welty Prize.
Thank you, Kendall, and I want to thank the University Press of Mississippi's board members, Thomas Richardson, Amanda Clay Powers, and MUW President Nora Miller for their long-standing shepherding and support of University Press of Mississippi. The Eudora Welty Prize has long recognized an outstanding book from University Press of Mississippi's list each year. The award brings one of our authors to the W, allows that author the joy of fellowship as one among those writers celebrated in the symposium, and it provides the quantifiable honor of a check. To our staff of 25 full-time publishers at University Press of Mississippi, this recognition indicates for us that this book, out of 95 books we publish each year, this book and this author are very special. This is what we should be publishing. In Path to Grace, Reimagining the Civil Rights Movement, Ethel Morgan Smith reminds us that the civil rights movement is ongoing. She witnesses again and again the power of ordinary citizens called to take extraordinary risks. She lifts up Alabama physicians called by the Lord to fight for health equity and allows us her own close fellowship with creators such as Gloria Naylor and Nikki Giovanni. Her very special beacon of a book has won the Eudora Welty Prize in the Symposium's 35th year. Please welcome to the stage Ethel Morgan Smith to receive the Eudora Welty Prize.
Thank you very much.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Ethel, for your marvelous book. I can't wait until Saturday morning when we get to hear you speak about it and read from it. I didn't introduce myself. Maybe I don't need one, but I'm Kendall Dunkelberg. I direct the Symposium and one or two other things at the W. And it is my great honor to introduce our keynote author, Katy Simpson Smith. But first, I want to thank the Robert M. Herron Foundation for the support they give the symposium each year, and President Miller for her continued support of the symposium and creative writing and literature at the W, along with all the other arts and many other aspects of the W that you support. I'm also grateful to all of our authors, to all those in the Department of Languages, Literature, and Philosophy who are helping out this weekend as moderators or behind the scenes, to the music department for letting us use this wonderful space, to the bookend who are selling books in the lobby, to resources management and Sodexo dining services, and to the commercial dispatch, Super Talk Radio, the Columbus Convention and Visitors Bureau, and local businesses like Friendly City Books who have helped us promote the Welty series. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out to our 35th annual Eudora Welty Writers Symposium. Our theme this year is With an Instrument Made of Air, the Transformative Magic of Story, which is inspired by Eudora Welty's story Circe from The Bride of Innisfallen. In it, Welty tells a familiar story from the Odyssey, giving us the sorceress Circe's perspective. Odysseus and his men visit her island of Aea, where she turns them into swine or into pigs. But Odysseus has the herb Molly given to him by Hermes to protect him from her potion. Circe is angry that he has avoided her spell, but she listens to his story of his journey from Troy. And though on the one hand, she is unimpressed since immortals don't need story to show their greatness, she also realizes that mortals, for all their frailty, keep something from her. Welty writes in Circe's voice, "They live by frailty, by the moment. I tell myself that it is only a mystery, and mystery is only uncertainty. There is no mystery in magic. Men are swine, let it be said, and no sooner said than done. Yet mortals alone can divine where it lies in each other, can find it and prick it in a secret, in all its peril, with an instrument made of air. I swear that only to possess that one trifling secret, I would willingly turn myself into a harmless dove for the rest of eternity." I understand that instrument made of air as representing the power of story to transform Odysseus from a swine into a man, into a hero. Humans don't have the divine powers of transformation that Circe has, but they do have a secret she wants and cannot quite grasp. And with that in mind, Katy Simpson Smith, with her fourth novel, The Weeds, became the obvious choice for our keynote. She weaves a gripping story. There are herbs and potions. There is a mystery, and perhaps even men who fit Circe's definition as swine. And there are women, strong as weeds, who forged their resistance. Katy Simpson Smith grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, in a house where Eudora Welty once lived. She has returned often, even for a year, teaching at Millsaps College as the Eudora Welty Chair in Southern Literature. Along the way, she earned her BA in history from Mount Holyoke, her MA and PhD in history from UNC Chapel Hill, and her MFA in creative writing from Bennington. She now lives in New Orleans, where she has taught at Tulane and University of New Orleans. And currently she is core faculty member of the Bennington Writing Seminars. And she is director of the Right for Mississippi Community Storytelling nonprofit and a regular judge for the Mississippi Scholastic Writing Awards. Her previous books include the historical study, We Have Raised All of You, Motherhood in the South, 1750 to 1835, and the novels, The Story of Land and Sea, Free Men, and The Everlasting. Her fourth novel, The Weeds, tells the story of two women in two times, one in the 19th century cataloging the flora in the Colosseum, and the other in the 21st century, who is re-examining this catalog, interrupted at times by the apparition of a ghost. Publishers Weekly, in comparing The Weeds to her previous novel, The Everlasting, calls it another sensuous and sprawling story of the eternal city that shows how, like the weeds of its title, women can fall through the cracks and still flourish. While Library Journal argues that by organizing her chapters by botanical families, Smith exemplifies the importance of combining science and storytelling, creating a novel that is erudite, playful, and filled with fury about gender inequality. It is a novel that experiments with form, driven as much by the lyricism of the natural world as by the very human concerns of its narrators and the conflicts that drive its plot. With her beautiful prose, Smith arrests time to form connections across the centuries and give us a story that is as haunting as it is wise. So I know we are in for a magical, transformative evening. Please join me in welcoming Katy Simpson Smith.
Thank you all so much. That was such a lovely introduction. Thank you to MUW, to President Miller, to Kendall for inviting me here, to the incredible fellow writers that I am sharing this weekend with. I am in awe to be in company with you all. And especially to my partner, Ryan Fertel, who is taking care of our 3-month-old son, Francis, and is making it possible for me to be here. So I brought my own copy of Circe to talk about, and then Kendall just totally talked about it better than I could have. So the one thing I'll add is that what really strikes me about the story, and especially about that passage that you read, Circe's kind of angst about the one thing she doesn't possess, the power of storytelling, which is a very frail power. What she is envious of is mortals' ability to retell a story. But it's Circe who is creating story. She's the one who's turning the men into pigs. The men aren't really doing anything. They're going to go home and tell their wives about it, and that'll be a good story. But she's the one who is creating story out of nothingness. And so I think she's kind of selling herself short in this story. And it makes me wonder about the woman who was writing this. In the early 1950s, Welty was living in a home in Jackson, Mississippi with her mother and a female boarder, 3 women alone in a house on a kind of island. It's up on a little raised hill in the Belhaven neighborhood of Jackson, Mississippi. And she was sitting down at her desk every morning with a kind of godlike ability to weave events out of nothingness. And so I have to wonder if she is aligning herself with the humans in this story. Is she arguing that humans' ability to tell tales to each other is one of our greatest powers? Or is she kind of secretly aligning herself with the goddess? She makes the story up, just like Circe. Is Eudora Welty a human or a god? Please discuss. And if anyone has any answers, please come talk to me about it this weekend, because I would love to talk more about it. So the projects that I have been working on recently have really focused on how women navigate their own powers in a world that is often quite hostile to those powers. And so I want to read from two different things tonight. First, I'm going to read a few sections from The Weeds, which Kendall so beautifully summarized. And then, because this feels like a safe space for taking risks, I would like to read a little bit from a project in process, a new novel that I have not read from before, and so you'll give me your feedback. So first, from The Weeds. As Kendall mentioned, there are two narrators, one in the 1850s and one in the present day, who are both botanical assistants tasked with cataloging all the species of plants growing in the Roman Colosseum. And they alternate voices in the book, and so I too will alternate their voices for you. And I'll start with the 19th century narrator, who is has recently been arrested for sneaking into people's houses in the middle of the night and stealing small objects from their rooms, ribbons, pieces of bread, watches. And her punishment is being apprenticed to this British botanist. Her father thinks that will keep her out of trouble. So we begin with her. Prunus avium, wild cherry. A sapling grows along the edge of the old battleground, barely tall enough to make fruit. The drupes are dark and small, following a white shower in spring. An angel tree, a tree of birds. Only its bark, striated, scarred by demon fingernails, reminds me of you, your back where the cat cut you. Cherry blood I had for dinner until your skin was clean. The nuns with their books look sideways at my hand on the trunk. It's late summer warm, and we all have covered our heads. I cannot imagine this arena clean, filled with white sand, camels parading for citizens. It has collapsed into another of Rome's overgrown humps. We clamber over it, men and goats. There are places to hide, places to kiss. The benches burst with shrubbery. If I did not have my ordered task, I could get lost between farms and shrines. I had thought to find a way out. Surely your ship has a sister, but the weeds proved better companions than the pall of my empty room. The day you left, I was apprehended by a night watchman, vagrancy, intent to burgle, and taken to the city jail, where I was carefully felt all over for weapons, for womanhood. And before my father could find me, the newspapers had. I was brought home in a shroud, my drawers emptied, your words found, sticky with the sap of love, redolent of theft. It was far from my first time. He paid the men, so only a small notice ran in the paper. Unknown woman seized, no further plot revealed. I can hear your silver laugh. All we did was plot. We drew futures out of nothing. It isn't natural, my father said, his hands pawing your letters. I said nature made us both, and him too, and stinging nettle. I had heard of Sister Benedetta 200 years ago, who found Christ in another nun's body, and the teacher who taught English at the grammar school, who was whispered about, who never married. A thing being rare doesn't make it wrong. My mother now wipes the scrape of cherry dirt from my cheek, and my father says my atonement won't last long. He's finding a man for his troublesome imp, and soon my acid will be alkalized. I have a biting sense of dread. Here's the contemporary narrator. Nautia arvensis, field Nautia. An electric violet pincushion flower, a kind of scabious, so called because they used to rub it on skin to cure plague, scabies, scabere, meaning to scratch. My dead mother told me not to pick at scabs But here I am, red-cheeked in the office of a man who is fed up with me, finally floating my own research project, a flora colicia. Yet another, my advisor says, eyes pricked with self-preservation. Of a different colicia, I say. I tell him about the Coliseum I grew up with, the Coliseum in Jackson, the once yellow-sided, now mirror-sided big top, where the circus came and sometimes Bobby Rush, where you went for the science fair, for graduation, for monster trucks. Its 6,500 seats proffered up for the Dixie National Rodeo, its circularity poised atop the crater of the Jackson volcano, its livestock barns radiating out like petals. The Coliseum here seated 50,000, he says. Bully for you, I say. He laughs, a laugh from the gut at what must have been my joke. The country bride Flora, the girl with her own research agenda, the girl with a gun. Flora have usually been written with a plan of discovery, he says, and everything has to twist so hard inside me to prevent a spewing forth of anti-colonialist rage. Self-discovery is something scientists could use more of, don't you think, I say? And so the expectation is that I will approve this, I don't want to say childish fancy, but shall we call it underdeveloped proposal, and you will leave in December without having accused me of whatever wrongs you have stored in your quiver. My quiver. He pantomimes pulling an arrow from behind his back and aiming it at me. I mean, if you want to tell me how to be smarter, I'd welcome that, but it doesn't seem like that's your goal. I think of him reading my notes, my anger, my weakness, my doodles. I wonder what it would feel like to have a mentor, a man who wasn't an adversary, a mother. He runs his hands across his desk, considering. Mississippi, then, is it? And here I thought you'd grown up and left home behind. So the plan is to belittle me. Papsella bursa pastoris, shepherd's purse. I was called a weed when I was small. I grew fast and was everywhere, and my father picked up his feet when I ran past as if he might become caught in my vines. 2 girls, each of us unwanted, everyone waiting on my mother's womb to produce something of worth. The seed pod of the shepherd's purse is heart-shaped and intentionally fragile. Some call them mother's hearts for how easy they are to break. My own mother eased herself out on an opium raft, her reasons more clear to me now that I have been pressed through adolescence. Simpler to watch from a cloud, to keep one's smile. When I came home, caught between my father's arms, the smell of jail still on me, his anger echoing, she took me to her bed and hid me in lavender. Outside the door, she met his shouts with whispers. That's when I heard, my head beneath her pillow, that he didn't want to keep me. How much quieter can I be, I thought, suffocating there. I sneak, I calm, I touch, I kiss without sound. I think she had one victory left in her, and through her fog, she won. It was wrong, I heard her say to him, but harmless. Women are harmless. A common misconception that because we cannot penetrate, we cannot maim. Nepeta glaucoma, ground ivy. The man with the pencil finds my sketches of Jackson's Coliseum. I've shaded the panels yellow and white, 60s style. They look absurd in his non-Mississippi hands. I try to describe the smell of aluminum. And this is a pleasant remembrance of youth, he says. I must remember he has been raised in unscented boarding schools. Childhood memories aren't pleasant, I say. They're either important or not important. My cotton candy fingers glued to my dead mother's arm during the lion taming, the feel of her hairs pulling against my skin, or my skin pulling at her hairs, stuckness and coming apartness. So why are you here, he asks. Here was my apartment, sprawled on a green tweed couch, my feet pressing into his thigh like cat's paws. Or here was the misty battleground of our relationship, which was so casual we barely knew each other's names. Or here was Rome, not home. All 3 places arguably not the right place to be. I take the sketches out of his hands, throw them behind the couch. I push my Roman Colosseum notes toward him as if they are masculine, good, rational science. And the Jackson Coliseum notes are feminine, emotion, weeping, whimsy. He drags his thumb below my copy of Deacon's description of the ground ivy. The lips violet, spotted in the throat, anthers before bursting, converging together into the form of a cross. And he nods. What's this one? Creeping Charlie, I say, ale hoof, ton hoof. He presses his palm against his temple as if I'm lancing his brain. Field balm, I say, gill over the ground, runaway robin. He crawls toward me. Was it my mother who sang through the clamor of the circus to the tormented lion, runaway robin? Hedera helix, common ivy. There's nothing so common as ivy. Invasive, undying, even if hacked back to the stub. Love, too, has tiny rootlets that search out trunks and stone and brick. Love, too, can topple a tree too small to hold it. Love, too, makes a hidden home for mice. It grows roots along its stems that make contact, adhere, pull closer, tighten into a lock. I hold back my bound journal when I give my week's notes to Deacon, who smells the loose pages before he reads them, searching, I think, for veracity, as if I hid myself in a lady's powder room to imagine my way into the dust and green of the Colosseum. And below my notes on umbels and ovate leaves, he writes his poem. The former splendor and greatness of Rome's temples, baths, towers, palaces, and tombs, over which the ivy now throws her slender arms and ever-shadowing mantle. Ivy to him isn't love, but a woman. Love is a woman, one-sided. Rome is a woman, conquered, embraced, brought low. A poem is a woman, rhymed and put away. He hands back the sheaf of notes and puts a question in his eyes. Have I not done more than you? Yes, I say with a servant's smile. You who cannot love are master. This is the last section I'll read from this. Circea Luticiana, enchanter's nightshade. Did you know the Romans called Paris Lutetia, witch city? As Burns go, I'd call that simple, classic, and to the point. From the city of sorceresses comes this nightshade, airy and light, and funnily, not all that poisonous, but downy stalked and downy fruited, like a lady at Montmartre who hasn't shaved. It sneaks in the darkest cracks and thus has earned a reputation for general nastiness. Circea from Circe, that bad girl. Alas, I need something more deadly to clear the field of foes. My eye flits ahead to the next species on the list, willow herb, which the Jackson icon Eudora Welty knew because it was also called fireweed and was the first thing growing in the craters left by 1940s bombs, their seeds lying dormant for however many years until a blast set them sprouting. Is it true, Eudora asked the man she loved who didn't love her back, who was in Rome, where people go who cannot love? I sort of hope the turmoil did not touch them that way, though, she wrote. I sort of hope the willow herb lives on still, but I'm scared to look. I wonder if Welty ever reached for more, or if Welty was a badass witch, or both. So my new novel is weirdly also very Circe inspired. It's about a woman, a poet who lives on the island of Malta, who has written a collection of poetry that is in need of translation. So she finds a man in America who is willing to translate her book of poetry. He flies to Malta with his linguistics professor, and they hole up in this villa on the Mediterranean, and various things ensue, including love and possibly murder. I was working on it during the pandemic, so it was sort of my attempt at an escapist book. I wanted to be anywhere else than 2020, as I think all of you did too. So I launched my brain into the Mediterranean in a very different time and place. So the section I want to read to you from is about Anna, who's the poet, the Maltese poet. And like Circe, she's created this sort of creative haven for herself on the island, and is having some trouble figuring out how to let men into that space. Wisely or unwisely is to be determined. On the other side of the world, a house above the sea slowly blew to dust. The sun carved away at its blonde stone, and the salt from the ocean licked through the windows, rhyming them. The housekeeper, a short woman from the countryside, spent Fridays scratching the glass clean with soap and her fingernails. The door was painted blue, and the trim was blue. On stormy days, it looked brooding, cold in the winter, but in the clean heat of summer, the house appeared like an oasis out of the brown scrub. Between the house and the sea, a courtyard stepped down in terraces, a tumbling kind of garden. Orange trees and rosemary, Madagascar jasmine. Anna had it planted heavy with scent because she had a childhood fear of one day losing her sight. The perfumery had replaced the old hedges of yew and boxwood that her grandfather had planted and her father had maintained, though she left a row of them guarding the front gates. She liked the illusion that this was a masculine place. The terraces were steep and stairs were cut into rock at odd places between the beds. A small pool had been dug beneath a bay laurel. Visitors had to hunt for the path down to the sea. Anna had been left the house because she had no brothers, no sons. The villagers kept their gossip to themselves, and only a few times had she heard the word Sahara as she glided from bakery to post office. But she wasn't a witch. Before her husband left with his mistress, she had worked in development for an arts foundation on the island, throwing parties, massaging checkbooks. Before he ever arrived, she had taught grade school in the village, English and dance. The poetry had never been a career, it had been a hiding place. At 2 a.m., sometimes she wrote a stanza on a lunch break on the back of a receipt. It was as though for years she had been throwing cherries at a stone wall, and only after the wall came down, after the men left, one by one, did the cherries take root and take her by surprise. After the second book, she quit her job at the foundation, donated her suits, and took to planting red campion and crown daisies. Visitors found her alongside the villa's gardener with dirt under her fingernails and unbrushed hair, thick and waving as a winter sea. And though she didn't cultivate this image of wildness, she did nothing to dispel it. She had had enough of thinking about what others thought. The second book had won a few prizes, so the third book was bought by a New York publisher. Anna, who at 40 years old spoke 5 languages and only wrote in Maltese, was getting an English translator. The house glowed in the falling light. It was set apart from the dusty village like a taw in a game of marbles. Max heard the moaning of the ocean, but he couldn't see it yet. Herschel, his professor, inched the car along a circular driveway in front of the low wall that embraced an interior courtyard. Max allowed himself to look up. Only 2 full stories, though a pair of top knots arose on either side, each no longer than a single room, all glinting glass. West-east, Herschel said, shifting her finger from turret to turret. Is she a painter? Max asked. He couldn't account for the luxury. Poet, Herschel said, remember? She bypassed the decorative knocker, a serpent's head, and rapped hard on the wooden doors. Her father was the painter, used the northern light, very fine with the canvases, expensive. Have I raised a paddle for one of his works? I have raised a paddle or 2. One day I will get my hands on something. The windows across the house were large, yawning. Max might have expected the facade to be softened with ivy, or at least window boxes, but only the blue painted casings relieved the starkness of the yellow stone and gave any hint that someone human lived there. The courtyard was a field of dust. Low doors to the left and right bore heavy ring poles that contributed to a medieval air, or was it carceral? But the sun was warm, the stone was bright. He was mid-Mediterranean. This was hardly a nightmare. He snapped his head around when the front door opened, lengthening his neck as if to claim belonging. But the man who greeted them didn't seem surprised. He was lanky, his pants dirty at the knees. Signora, signore, he said, scraping the door across the tiles of the foyer. The front hall was vast, sonorous. A massive staircase curved toward the back, and doors along the sides offered glimpses into sun-drenched rooms, modestly furnished. Max understood that wealth's greatest skill could be subtlety. He admired it. The tall man, Umberto, he said, led them into a room at the back of the house where a pale blue rug, artfully old, spread across the stone tiles like a lake. This blue led to the deeper blue of the window frames, and beyond, Max's first glimpse of an electric blue sea. How could water be so friendly and raging? The hue was tropical, crystalline, but the material beat itself outrageously against the rocks. The waves churned, smashing against each other, and the detritus of this, white foam, puffed and blew lazily away. He was mesmerized. Herschel sat down on a creaky chair made of rattan and silk. "Don't fall in love too soon," she said. "Work comes first." It wasn't love he felt, but a kind of chill. A pelican flapped past the vista like a poorly hinged marionette. How could anyone write in this house? A wave buffeted upward in an explosion of little white crystals. He could taste the salt. "Where is she?" he said, suddenly desperate. "What is she?" he wanted to ask. "What is this? Where have you brought me?" "It's Malta, but not." Herschel ran her fingers across the silk cushion. The scene was storks and palms, green and gold, filigree. "Love, but not. We work adjacent. That's how we come in, through the side, yes? I say to you good evening in this language. I say bonsoir. You say like bonsoir? I say no, but close." "We're on a different island," Max said. The sound of the water was making him dizzy. "You say, 'My darling, I love all of you.' She says, 'But what about I forget my keys everywhere?' And you say, 'All right, this I don't love so much.' Is that love? No, but close." Before Herschel's riddle could run further into absurdities, a hush sounded on the hallway tile and a dress swam into the room. He was still staring at its hem, dusky, translucent, blue, of course, when it spoke. "Have you never come to the island of Gozo?" The moonlight floated off the pool and shimmered in Anna's hair. They were alone, night 3, and Max was beginning to feel loose and lazy. A bottle of Kinney perched on the edge, sweating. She had introduced him to the national soda, and he couldn't get enough. It was bitter, resistant, honey dark. She stretched out on a chaise and watched him stroke through the water. He didn't like that Herschel had chosen to stay in the apartment in town. This was a drug. "You haven't said yet that you admire my poems," she said. One foot was bare, a sandal dangled from the other. He couldn't convince her to swim. "I'm a servant to the poems," he said. "God doesn't demand that believers prove their love." She laughed. "That is precisely what God does do." "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Of course not. And it is worse for you because I can read the language you shape my poems into." He pushed against the wall of the pool and floated away on his back. "You didn't consider translating them yourself?" "I had a thought and I expressed it. To re-express it would be to kill it." He nodded, his head dipping back into the water, sending waves toward a toe of hers that had found its way to the edge. "To love it would be to kill it too," he said. "So I remain neutral." "Ah, what a mistake." He was surprised. He had taken her for an anti-sentimentalist. "You, new friend," she said, "have been running from the wrong thing." Max was here to work. He was here to translate, to study, to listen, to examine the context of the poems, earn the respect of the poet, get the work done, and go home. But home didn't have this clear water, or that woman free from the threads of history. He swam over to her toe. He brushed a finger across its skin. She didn't smile down at him, but behind the stillness of her face were wounds that gave him the same shock of warmth. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about me or each other. Yes.
Inspired or like how they inspired their stories?
Such a good question. She asked how the lives of the women around me have inspired my own stories in life. I have been blessed with a very strong and amazing mother who prioritized her career over a kind of classical maternal image, I think. And yet she has been so loving and giving of her time with me. Both my parents were professors, and so they did had a lot of research projects, and were often traveling to conferences and to archives to look things up. And my image of them, first and foremost, was as self-actualized humans rather than as parents. And now that I'm a mother, I recognize what a challenge that is. It's very easy for me to lose days with my son in my arms, and then blink and it's like a week later and I haven't accomplished anything. And I think, oh, well, I'm accomplishing motherhood, and that is a great gift. But then I am able to come here and talk about my work, and I realize that my identity has to be split between my own pursuits and passion and tending to this new human in the world. And that ideally the new human will inform my own sense of language and literature, and that will then inform my raising of him. And I think my mother was the first one to teach me that it can be circular in that way. And so I'm very grateful to her, if that answers your question. Yes.
The botanist and even the man still kind of names. I'm guessing there was something that I was wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is about why the women narrators don't have names, but the men kind of do. The only one with a real name, as you note, is Deacon, the botanist. And he's a real historical figure. So I found his book of plants from the Colosseum. And that was my jumping off point. I knew that I wanted to use that as the framework for this story. So in my head, I thought, okay, Richard Deacon is a real man. But then in the writing of the story, first, I think it was almost accidental. Like I was writing through these women's voices. And then when it came to a point in time where someone would have had to address them, like, hey, Mary, I was like, oh no, do I have to name them? I realized, no, I don't. And partially that choice made sense because the whole project of science never named them. For centuries, science has only named men who have traditionally white men who have discovered things, and has not recognized the sort of innate knowledge of all kinds of people who are not white men. And so I wanted to kind of nod to that. And hope that the reader gets kind of increasingly frustrated over the course of the book. It's like Deacon this, Deacon that. Like, well, what about these protagonists who are more important than him? And my hope is that even by not naming them, the point is made that they are vastly more important in terms of both the scut work of science itself, the collecting of the data, but also injecting a kind of emotion and feeling back into this discipline that I think badly needs it. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Last chance. Thank you all so much. And I hope you come to all the other panels this weekend, and please buy these authors' books because they're amazing, and get them to sign them for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Katie, and thank you, everyone. We do have books for sale. And our authors, I'm going to ask you to find your place at a couple of tables out in the lobby for a book signing. There should be reception food over on this side. So please linger, talk, ask those questions that you didn't ask in the Q&A, ask them privately. Thank you again for coming tonight, and I welcome you all back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for our next panel, or 1:30 p.m. for our third panel, and or Saturday at 9:30 a.m. I'll let you sleep in just a little bit for our final panel. Again, thank you all and have a great evening. I hope to see you out in the lobby.